The advertisement had been crumpled in Amelia Dawson's coat pocket for 3 days before desperation finally drove her to the remote cattle ranch outside Independence, California, where a cowboy named Thomas Northfield supposedly needed a cook badly enough not to ask too many questions. The stagecoach let her off at a weathered fence post marking the entrance to the Northfield property in late September of 1882. And Amelia stood there in the high desert afternoon, with one hand pressed protectively against the small swell of her belly beneath her widow's blacks, and the other clutching her single carpetbag. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose dramatic and unforgiving to the west, their peaks already dusted with early snow despite the lingering warmth in the valley. She had traveled nearly 200 miles from Sacramento after her husband, James, had been killed in a logging accident 4 months prior, leaving her alone and expecting their first child with nothing but debts and the cold scrutiny of his disapproving family who had made it abundantly clear she was not welcome to remain. The ranch house itself appeared after she had walked nearly a quarter-mile down the dusty drive. A sturdy structure of timber and stone that looked like it had been built to withstand the harsh winters that swept down from the mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney, and she could see several outbuildings scattered across the property, including a large barn and what appeared to be a bunkhouse. Cattle dotted the golden grasslands stretching toward the foothills, and the whole place had an air of careful maintenance despite its remote location. Amelia straightened her shoulders and approached the front porch, knocking firmly on the weathered wooden door before her courage could fail her. She had rehearsed her story carefully during the long journey. She would say nothing about the baby, not yet. She would prove herself capable first, show this Thomas Northfield that she could work hard and earn her keep. Once she had established her value, once she had nowhere else to go and winter was closing in, then perhaps he would allow her to stay despite her condition. It was not an honorable plan, but honor was a luxury she could no longer afford. The man who opened the door was not what she had expected. Thomas Northfield stood well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe, but his face was young, perhaps 26 or 27 at most, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of sage that studied her with an intensity that made her want to step backward. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and he wore work-worn clothes that spoke of a man who labored alongside his ranch hands rather than simply directing them. "Help you, madam." His voice was deep and measured, carrying the careful courtesy of a man raised with proper manners, despite the rough circumstances of frontier life. "I am here about the advertisement," Amelia said, lifting her chin and meeting his gaze directly even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "For the cook position. I saw your notice in the Sacramento newspaper." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, followed by what might have been concern as his eyes took in her black dress and the obvious signs of her widowhood. "That advertisement ran 6 weeks ago, madam." "I had figured no one was coming. I apologize for the delay in my arrival. I had matters to settle before I could travel." This was true enough, though the matters had involved selling everything she owned to pay James's debts and facing the harsh reality that his family would rather see her destitute than offer assistance. "The position is still available, I hope." Thomas Northfield was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to the carpetbag she carried and then back again. She watched him take in details, the way a careful man assessed a situation, and she held her breath waiting for him to send her away. Instead, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside out of the sun. You must be tired from traveling." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly well appointed, with solid furniture that showed quality craftsmanship and windows that let in generous light. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a large table that could seat 8 or 10 men. Through an open doorway, she could see the kitchen, and her practiced eye immediately noted the cast iron stove, the well-stocked shelves, and the general organization that spoke of someone who had been managing adequately if not expertly. "Sit down, please," Thomas said, gesturing to one of the chairs at the table. "I will get you some water." Amelia sat gratefully, her feet aching from the long walk up the drive in boots that were wearing thin. She was 22 years old and felt ancient with exhaustion and grief. Thomas returned with a tin cup of cold water that she accepted with quiet thanks, drinking deeply while he settled into the chair across from her. "I should be honest with you, Mrs. Dawson," he began, and her stomach sank because she recognized the tone of a man preparing to deliver disappointing news. "When I placed that advertisement, I was expecting someone older. A widow woman, yes, but someone past childbearing years looking for a quiet place to work. You are very young, and I worry about the propriety of the situation. I am a respectable widow, Mr. Northfield, and I assure you I have no designs on anything beyond honest work for honest pay." The words came out more sharply than she intended, born of weeks of veiled insults from James's family about her character and intentions. "I need this position quite desperately, and I promise you will have no cause to question my conduct or my capabilities." He held up one hand in a peaceable gesture. "I mean no offense, madam, but I have 6 men working this ranch, and while they are good men, I cannot help but think of how it might look to have a young woman in your situation living here, for your sake as much as mine. My situation." Amelia felt cold fear wash through her. Had he somehow guessed about the baby already? It was too early for it to be obvious beneath her loose morning dress, but perhaps something in her face or her desperation had given her away. A recent widow, alone in the world. People talk, Mrs. Dawson. Small communities like Independence have long memories and quick judgments. Relief and shame warred in her chest. He was worried about gossip, not about discovering her pregnancy. "I am well acquainted with both, Mr. Northfield. I assure you, nothing people might say could be worse than what I have already endured. I need this work. I am a good cook, I am strong, and I will not cause trouble. Please, at least allow me to demonstrate my skills before you send me away." Thomas studied her face for another long moment, and she forced herself to meet his eyes steadily despite wanting to look away from the keen intelligence she saw there. He was not a man easily fooled, and she felt the weight of her deception like a stone in her chest. But what choice did she have? Where else could she go? "All right," he said finally. "I will give you a trial period. 2 weeks. You can sleep in the small room off the kitchen. It is not large, but it has a good bed and a door that locks. You will cook 3 meals a day for myself and the 6 ranch hands. Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 7. I will pay you $15 a month plus room and board. If after 2 weeks we both find the arrangement suitable, we can discuss a longer term." $15 a month was not generous, but it was more than Amelia had expected, and the offer of room and board meant she would not have to spend any of it on survival. She could save every penny toward the baby's arrival. "Thank you, Mr. Northfield. You will not regret this decision. Call me Thomas, please. We do not stand much on formality out here." He rose from his chair, and she did the same. "Let me show you to your room, and then I will introduce you to the men. They will be coming in for supper in a few hours, which I suppose will be your first test." The room he showed her was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, a simple dresser and a washstand, but it was clean and the bed looked comfortable. A small window looked out toward the mountains, and when Amelia set her carpetbag on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress, she felt the first faint stirring of something that might have been hope. "Take some time to settle in," Thomas said from the doorway. "I will be in the barn if you need anything. The larder is fully stocked, and you should find everything you need in the kitchen." After he left, Amelia allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to sit in silence, her hands pressed against her face, breathing deeply and steadying her nerves. Then she stood, unpacked her few belongings into the dresser, and went to examine the kitchen properly. It was well equipped, better than she had dared hope. The stove was a good model, the pots and pans were quality iron, and the larder held flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, dried beef, canned vegetables, and various other staples. There was a root cellar accessible through a trap door in the floor, and when she climbed down the ladder with a lamp, she found potatoes, onions, carrots, and apples stored in neat bins. Someone had been managing this kitchen with care, and she felt a flicker of curiosity about Thomas Northfield and his life here. She spent the next 2 hours preparing supper, falling into the familiar rhythms of cooking that had always brought her comfort. She made biscuits from scratch, using a light hand with the dough that her mother had taught her years ago. She fried salt pork until it was crispy and used the drippings to make a rich gravy. She boiled potatoes and carrots together and mashed them with butter and cream from the springhouse. It was simple fare, but it was hearty and well prepared, and by the time she heard Boots on the porch, she had everything laid out on the big table in serving dishes. Thomas entered first, followed by 6 men who stopped in their tracks at the sight of her. They were a varied group, ranging in age from a fresh-faced boy, who could not have been more than 18, to a grizzled man with silver in his beard, who looked like he had seen every hard winter the Sierra Nevada could throw at a person. They were all clean, she noticed, their faces washed and their hair combed, and they removed their hats as they came through the door. "Men, this is Mrs. Dawson. She will be cooking for us from now on." Thomas made the introduction simply, then gestured to each man in turn. "This is William Carter, my foreman. Jack Morrison, Henry Wells, Samuel Preston, young Robert Taylor, and Charlie Hughes." They nodded and murmured greetings, their eyes curious but not unkind. Amelia folded her hands in front of her and addressed them quietly. "I hope the meal is to your satisfaction, gentlemen. Please let me know if there is anything you particularly like or dislike, and I will do my best to accommodate your preferences." "Smells better than anything that has come out of this kitchen in a long while," the foreman William said with a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He was perhaps 40, with capable hands and an air of solid reliability. "No offense, boss. None taken. I know my limitations in the kitchen." Thomas pulled out a chair, and the men followed suit, settling around the table with the easy familiarity of people who shared meals together regularly. Amelia served them, moving around the table to fill plates and pour coffee, and then retreated to the kitchen to give them privacy. She had not eaten since morning, and her stomach was making its emptiness known, but she would wait until they were finished. She was the cook, not a guest at their table. She was cleaning the preparation dishes when Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Dawson, you are not eating." "I will have something after I finish cleaning, Mr. Northfield." "Thomas," she corrected when he raised an eyebrow at her. "You will sit and eat now. There is more than enough, and you look like a strong wind would blow you over. Come." It was not quite an order, but it was not a request either, and Amelia found herself following him back to the table where the men had left a chair open between young Robert and Samuel. They included her in their conversation as she ate, asking polite questions about her journey and commenting enthusiastically on the quality of the biscuits. She learned that the ranch ran about 300 head of cattle, that they were preparing for the fall roundup, and that Thomas had inherited the property from his uncle 2 years prior and had been working to build it into something more prosperous. "Your uncle did not have family of his own?" she asked Thomas, genuinely curious. "He never married. He was my mother's brother, and when he passed, the property came to me. I had been working on a ranch in Nevada, saving money and learning the business. This gave me the opportunity to have my own place sooner than I had expected." There was something in the careful way he spoke about it that made Amelia think there was more to the story, but she did not pry. Everyone had their private sorrows, and she certainly had no right to probe at his when she was hiding her own desperate circumstances. After supper, the men thanked her genuinely for the meal and filed out to the bunkhouse, leaving Thomas to help her clear the table despite her protests that it was her job. "How long were you married, if you do not mind my asking?" he said as they worked side by side at the wash basin, his voice gentle enough that she understood he was trying to know her better, not merely satisfying curiosity. 14 months. James died in July, a logging accident near Sacramento. The words still felt unreal in her mouth, as though she were talking about someone else's tragedy. "We had not been married long enough for me to feel truly part of his family, I think. After he died, they made it clear I should move on and not be a burden to them. That seems harsh. They were not wealthy people. Another mouth to feed, another person to worry about. I understood their position even if it hurt." She handed him a clean plate to dry, careful not to let their fingers touch. "This opportunity, your advertisement, it was an answer to a prayer I was not certain anyone was hearing." Thomas was quiet for a moment, drying the plate with slow, methodical movements. "I am glad you came then. The men were certainly pleased with supper. It has been a long time since this house felt like a proper home. You live here alone otherwise. Besides the ranch hands, I mean." "Yes, the men have the bunkhouse, and I have been rattling around in this place by myself. My uncle built it for the family he hoped to have someday, but that never came to pass. It feels too large for one person." There was a loneliness in his words that resonated with the hollow place in Amelia's own chest. She wanted to say something comforting, but what comfort could she offer when she was deceiving him about her condition? Instead, she focused on washing the last of the dishes, and when they were finished, Thomas bid her good night and headed out to check on the livestock one final time before bed. Amelia retreated to her small room, changed into her nightgown, and lay in the narrow bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night. Coyotes called from somewhere in the hills, and the wind whispered through the eaves of the house. She placed one hand on her belly, feeling the small roundness there that would soon become impossible to hide. "We will be all right," she whispered to the baby growing inside her. "Somehow, we will find a way." The days fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and strangely comforting. Amelia rose before dawn to start breakfast, feeding hungry men who worked hard and ate accordingly. She spent her mornings cleaning the house and preparing the noon meal, her afternoons planning supper and doing laundry or mending, her evenings cooking again and falling into bed exhausted but with the satisfaction of work well done. Thomas was a good employer, neither hovering over her nor ignoring her existence. He often ate breakfast alone in the kitchen before the other men arrived, and she found herself looking forward to those quiet mornings when they would talk about small things. He told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and improve the grazing lands. She told him about growing up in a small farming community, about learning to cook from her mother who had fed a family of 7 on very little. She did not tell him about the baby, though the secret grew heavier with each passing day. She was approaching 5 months now, and while her loose dresses still concealed the truth, she knew her time was running out. The 2-week trial period passed, and Thomas asked her to stay on permanently, offering her $18 a month and praising her cooking and the care she took with the house. She accepted with profound relief and growing guilt. It was early November when everything changed. Amelia had been at the ranch for just over 5 weeks, and she had begun to feel almost secure in her position. The morning sickness that had plagued her earlier months had passed, and she had convinced herself that she might be able to hide her condition for another few weeks, perhaps even until after the first of the year, when the winter snows would make it impossible for Thomas to send her away even if he wanted to. She was wrong. She was carrying a basket of laundry out to the line behind the house when a sudden gust of wind caught one of the sheets and sent it billowing. She turned quickly to catch it, twisting awkwardly, and felt a sharp pain in her lower back. The basket fell from her hands and she cried out, more from surprise than agony, but the sound brought Thomas running from the barn. "Are you hurt?" He reached her side in seconds, his hands going to her shoulders to steady her, and that was when she saw his eyes widen as he took in the unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the dress that had been pressed tight against her body by the wind. Amelia froze, watching understanding dawn across his face, followed by something that looked like betrayal. He stepped back from her, his jaw tight, and she felt her entire world tilting sideways. "You are with child." It was not a question. Yes, there was no point in denying it now. "I am sorry. I should have told you from the beginning, but I was afraid you would not hire me if you knew." "You are right about that." His voice was hard in a way she had never heard before. "When were you planning to mention it? When you went into labor in my kitchen?" "I do not know. I was not thinking clearly. I just needed somewhere to go, some way to survive." Tears were burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Please, Thomas, I have nowhere else. If you send me away, I do not know what will happen to me or to my baby." "You should have thought of that before you lied to me." He turned away from her, one hand coming up to rub at the back of his neck in a gesture of profound frustration. "How far along are you?" "Nearly 5 months." 5 months. He repeated it quietly, still not looking at her. "That means the baby will come in March or April. Late March, I believe." He was silent for so long that Amelia began to shake, her hands clenched at her sides and her breath coming in short gasps. Finally, he turned back to face her, and the anger in his expression had been replaced by something more complicated. "I should send you away. You lied to me, and you put both of us in a terrible position. If people in town find out I have a pregnant widow living here, they will assume the worst no matter what the truth is." "I know. I am sorry. I will go." She did not know where she would go, but she would figure something out. She had to. "I did not say you had to leave." The word stopped her as she turned toward the house. "I said I should send you away, but I am not going to." Amelia turned back slowly, afraid to hope. "What do you mean?" "I mean you are going to stay. You are already home." He said it firmly, as though making a decision that could not be unmade. "But things cannot continue as they have been. We need to discuss this properly, figure out how to handle the situation." "I do not understand. You are not angry." "Oh, I am angry. I am furious that you lied to me, but I am not heartless, Amelia. I am not going to throw a pregnant woman out into the cold with nowhere to go, no matter how angry I might be." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside. Leave the laundry. We need to talk." They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where they had shared quiet breakfasts and easy conversation, but now the air between them was heavy with tension. Thomas poured coffee for both of them with steady hands, then settled across from her. "Tell me everything," he said. "The truth this time. All of it." So she did. She told him about James, about the logging camp and the terrible day when they had come to tell her he was dead. She told him about the debts she had not known existed, about selling everything they owned and still not having enough. She told him about his family's cold dismissal, about the weeks of searching for any kind of work that would take a widow with no references and few skills beyond cooking and housekeeping. She told him about finding his advertisement and seeing it as her only chance. "I know I deceived you," she finished quietly, her coffee untouched and growing cold. "I knew it was wrong, but I convinced myself that if I could just prove my worth first, perhaps you would be willing to overlook the circumstances. I needed time, and I needed a place to stay. I am not proud of my choices, Thomas, but I am not sorry I made them. My baby deserves a chance at life, and I will do whatever I must to give that to them." Thomas had listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Now he leaned back in his chair and studied her face with those sage-colored eyes that seemed to see too much. "I admire your determination, even if I cannot approve of your methods. But you are right that we need to think about the baby. Have you seen a doctor?" "Not since I left Sacramento." There was a midwife there who confirmed the pregnancy and said everything seemed normal. "There is a doctor in Independence, Dr. Mitchell. He is a good man and discreet. I will take you to see him next week." "I cannot afford a doctor, Thomas." "I did not ask if you could afford it. You work for me and I take care of my people. You will see the doctor." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "This is not negotiable, Amelia. If you are going to stay here and you are going to have a baby under my roof, then you are going to have proper medical care. Understood?" She nodded, overwhelmed by his matter-of-fact kindness. "Why are you being so good to me, after what I did?" "Because I understand desperation. I know what it is to have nowhere to turn and no one to rely on. And because, despite your deception, you have been nothing but honest and hardworking in every other way. You care for this place like it is your own home. You cook meals that make my men smile. You have brought warmth and life to a house that badly needed both. I am not going to throw that away because you made a difficult choice in impossible circumstances." Amelia felt the tears she had been holding back spill over and run down her cheeks. "Thank you. I do not deserve your kindness, but I am grateful for it. You deserve better than what life has given you so far. We will figure this out together." He reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand, a gesture of comfort that made her heart do something strange in her chest. Then he stood, pushing away from the table. "I need to get back to work." "Why don't you rest for a while? You have had a shock and you should take care of yourself." After he left, Amelia sat for a long time at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the cold coffee cup, trying to understand what had just happened. Thomas Northfield had every right to be furious with her, to send her away without a second thought. Instead, he had chosen compassion. He had said she was already home. The words echoed in her mind as she finally rose and went back to her small room. She lay down on the narrow bed and placed both hands on her belly, feeling the flutter of movement that had started a few weeks ago. "Your father would have liked Thomas," she whispered to the baby. "He was a good man too, though I think Thomas might be stronger. We are going to be all right now. He said we could stay. We have a home." Over the next few weeks, something shifted in the dynamic between Amelia and Thomas. The easy companionship they had been building was gone, replaced by a careful politeness that felt like walking on broken glass. He no longer sat with her during breakfast, taking his meals with the ranch hands instead. When he spoke to her, it was about practical matters only. The warmth that had been growing between them had been frozen by her deception, and Amelia felt the loss of it like a physical ache. She tried to show him through her actions what she could not say with words. She cooked his favorite meals. She mended his clothes with careful stitches. She kept the house spotless and organized. She worked harder than her pregnant body wanted to allow, determined to prove her worth and earn back his trust. True to his word, Thomas took her to see Dr. Mitchell in Independence on a cold November morning. The doctor was a kind man in his 50s who examined her thoroughly and pronounced both her and the baby healthy. "You are working too hard, though," he said, giving her a stern look over his spectacles. "A woman in your condition needs rest. Are you getting adequate nutrition? Enough sleep?" "I am a cook on a cattle ranch. I eat well and I sleep as much as my work allows." Dr. Mitchell turned to Thomas, who had been waiting outside during the examination but had been called in for the consultation. "She needs to reduce her workload, Mr. Northfield, especially as she gets further along. Heavy lifting, long hours on her feet, these things can be dangerous for both mother and child." "I will make sure she has help," Thomas said immediately, "and that she rests when she needs to." "I do not need help," Amelia protested. "I can manage my responsibilities. You heard the doctor. You are going to accept help and you are going to rest when necessary." Thomas used the same tone he had employed when insisting she see the doctor, and Amelia recognized there was no point in arguing. On the drive back to the ranch, they sat in silence for a long time, the wagon rattling over the rough road while the horses plodded steadily. Finally, Thomas spoke. "I have been thinking about the situation, about what will happen when the baby comes." Amelia felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you cannot work as you have been and care for an infant, and people in town are going to talk when they find out. There will be questions, assumptions." "I know. I have thought about it too. Perhaps I can keep the baby with me in the kitchen while I work." Other women manage. Other women have husbands to provide for them. Other women are not trying to maintain their reputation while living on a ranch with 7 men. He was quiet for another moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I have a proposal if you are willing to hear it." "Of course." "We could marry. Before the baby comes. It would solve several problems at once. The baby would have a name, you would have a husband to support you, and no one would question your presence here." Amelia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. I have thought it through carefully. It would be a practical arrangement, nothing romantic. I need someone to manage my household, and you need security for yourself and your child. We get along well enough, and we could build a good life here together." "Thomas, you barely speak to me anymore. You cannot stand to be in the same room with me since you found out about the baby. How could we possibly marry?" I was angry about the lie, Amelia. I needed time to work through that. But I was never angry about the baby itself, and I am not angry at you as a person. You did what you had to do to survive. I can understand that even if I wish you had trusted me sooner. This is insane. You do not love me. I do not love you. Marriage should be based on more than practical necessity. Should it? How many marriages in this world are based on love versus practicality? At least we would be honest with each other about our reasons. And who knows, perhaps affection would grow over time. We could do worse than to build something together based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Amelia did not know what to say. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to grab onto the security and legitimacy he was offering with both hands. But another part of her, the part that had loved James and believed in romance and partnership, recoiled at the idea of a marriage of pure convenience. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course. But do not take too long. If we are going to do this, it should be soon. You are starting to show, and it would be better if we were married before anyone in town notices your condition." That night, Amelia lay awake for hours, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Marriage to Thomas would solve her immediate problems, give her baby legitimacy and a home. But what kind of life would it be, married to a man who felt obligated to care for her rather than wanting to. What kind of example would that set for her child? Yet what was the alternative? She could refuse his proposal and continue working until the baby came, but then what? How would she manage an infant and her duties? How long before Thomas's charity ran out and he sent her away? Where would she go with a newborn child and no resources? She thought about James, about the love they had shared even if it had been brief. He had been kind and gentle, always making her laugh even during hard times. She had grieved him deeply and still did. But James was gone and she was here, alive and pregnant and desperately in need of a solution to an impossible situation. Thomas was offering her that solution. He was a good man, that much she knew. He was fair and hardworking, intelligent and capable. He had been kind to her even when he had every right to be angry. He treated his animals and his employees with respect. Those were not small things. And if she was honest with herself, she had begun to care for him before he discovered her secret. Those quiet morning conversations had meant something to her. The way he smiled when he particularly enjoyed a meal, the sound of his laugh when one of the ranch hands told a joke at supper, the careful way he had helped her hang curtains when she wanted to freshen up the parlor. She had noticed these things, filed them away like treasures. Perhaps affection would grow, he had said. Perhaps it would. Perhaps it already had, at least on her side, though she had not allowed herself to acknowledge it while she was still so recently widowed and so focused on survival. 3 days later, over breakfast while the ranch hands were out checking on the cattle, Amelia gave Thomas her answer. "I will marry you, but I need you to understand something first." He set down his coffee cup, his full attention on her. "What is it?" "I will not be a burden to you. I will continue to work as long as I am able. I will be a proper wife in terms of managing your household and caring for your home, but I cannot promise you love, Thomas. I care deeply for James, and he has only been gone a few months. My heart is not ready for that kind of feeling again, and I do not know if it ever will be. I am not asking for your love, Amelia. I am asking for your partnership. If love comes, then we will be blessed. If it does not, then we will still have built something worthwhile together. Is that agreeable to you?" "Yes, that is agreeable." "Then we will go into town tomorrow and speak to Reverend Matthews. He can marry us at the church or here at the ranch if you prefer privacy. Here, I think, with just your men as witnesses if they are willing. I do not need a celebration, just a simple ceremony." Thomas nodded, and for the first time since he had discovered her secret, he smiled at her. It was not a broad grin, but it was genuine, and it made something warm unfold in Amelia's chest. "We will make this work, Amelia. I promise you that." "I hope you are right." They were married 5 days later on a clear November afternoon with the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, and the 6 ranch hands gathered in the parlor as witnesses. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with simple dignity, and when Thomas slipped a gold band onto Amelia's finger, she felt the weight of it like a promise. "You may kiss your bride," the Reverend said, and there was an awkward moment where both of them hesitated before Thomas leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief and proper, but Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks nonetheless. The ranch hands congratulated them warmly, and William the foreman produced a bottle of whiskey that he passed around for toasts. Amelia had prepared a special supper for the occasion, and they all crowded around the table sharing food and conversation, while the light faded outside and lamps were lit against the gathering dark. When the men finally left for the bunkhouse, Amelia began clearing the table, but Thomas stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Leave it for tonight. You must be exhausted." "I am all right. I am used to the work." "Amelia, leave it, please." There was something in his voice that made her set down the plates and turn to face him. We need to discuss the sleeping arrangements. She had been trying not to think about this all day. Of course, I assumed I would continue to use the small room off the kitchen. No. You are my wife now, not my cook. You will take the main bedroom. Thomas, I cannot take your room. Where would you sleep? There are 3 other bedrooms in this house. I will use one of those. The main bedroom is the largest and most comfortable. It should be yours, especially given your condition. This is your home. I will not displace you. It is our home now, and I am not being displaced. I am choosing to give you the better room because you need it more than I do. Please, Amelia, do not argue with me about this. It has been a long day, and I think we are both tired. He was right about that. The emotion and stress of the day had left her feeling wrung out and shaky. Very well. Thank you for everything, for marrying me, for your kindness. I know this is not what you planned when you placed that advertisement. No, but then very little in life goes according to plan. We make the best of what we are given. He hesitated, then reached out and gently touched her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly soft against her skin. You are a good woman, Amelia Northfield. I am glad you answered my advertisement, even if the circumstances were not what either of us expected. Hearing her new name spoken aloud made it real in a way the ceremony had not. She was no longer Amelia Dawson, young widow with no prospects. She was Amelia Northfield, wife of a respected rancher, with a home and security for herself and her baby. Good night, Thomas. Good night, wife. The words settled over her like a blanket as she made her way to the main bedroom, finding her few belongings already moved from the small room and placed carefully in the larger space. The bed was substantial, covered with quilts that looked handmade, and when she lay down after changing into her nightgown, she sank into the mattress with a sigh of relief. She had married a stranger to save herself and her child. It was not the romantic story she had once dreamed of, but it was better than the alternative. And perhaps, just perhaps, Thomas was right that affection could grow over time. She fell asleep with her hands on her belly and her heart cautiously hopeful. The winter months passed in a strange new rhythm. Amelia continued her work in the kitchen, though Thomas insisted on hiring a young woman from town named Mary to come 3 times a week to help with the heavier cleaning and laundry. She protested that it was unnecessary, but he was immovable on the subject, and she eventually admitted to herself that the help was welcome as her pregnancy progressed and her energy waned. Thomas was a considerate husband in all the practical ways. He made sure she had everything she needed, consulted her on household decisions, and spoke to her with unfailing courtesy. They took their meals together now, sitting at opposite ends of the long table and talking about safe subjects like the ranch operations and the weather and the upcoming roundup in the spring. What they did not talk about was anything personal. They did not speak of James or of Thomas's past. They did not discuss feelings or fears or hopes for the future. They existed in a careful equilibrium that was polite and peaceful, and somehow desperately lonely, despite the fact that they were rarely apart. Amelia found herself watching Thomas when he was not looking, noticing small things. The way he was gentle with the horses, speaking to them in a low voice that seemed to calm even the most skittish animals. The way he read in the evenings, sitting by the fire with a book, and becoming so absorbed that he forgot the world around him. The way he always made sure she was comfortable, bringing extra pillows for her back without being asked, stoking the fire when he saw her shiver. She caught him watching her sometimes too, his expression unreadable but his eyes intent. When their gazes met, he would look away quickly, and the moment would pass without comment. In late December, a storm swept down from the mountains and buried the ranch under 2 feet of snow. The men worked from dawn until dusk, keeping the livestock fed and the paths cleared, and Amelia kept hot coffee and hearty meals ready for them whenever they stumbled in half-frozen. Thomas came in late one evening covered in snow and ice, his lips blue with cold, and Amelia felt a spike of fear that surprised her with its intensity. "Get those wet clothes off before you freeze solid," she ordered, pulling him toward the fire and beginning to unbutton his coat with hands that shook slightly. "You are going to make yourself sick, staying out in this weather for so long." The cattle needed checking. "We lost 2 calves to the cold already." His teeth were chattering, and when she got his coat off she could see he was shivering violently beneath his wet shirt. "The shirt, too, off with it. I will get you dry things and hot coffee." She bustled away to his bedroom, which she still thought of as his even though he had moved to the smaller room down the hall. She found fresh clothes and brought them back to find him stripped to the waist and standing as close to the fire as he could safely get. For a moment she froze, looking at the lean, muscled lines of his back and shoulders, the play of firelight across his skin. He was beautiful in a raw, masculine way that made her breath catch. Then he turned and caught her staring, and heat that had nothing to do with the fire flooded her face. She thrust the dry clothes at him and fled to the kitchen to make coffee with trembling hands, feeling like a foolish girl instead of a married woman. When he emerged a few minutes later, dressed and warmer, she had composed herself enough to hand him a cup of coffee without meeting his eyes. They sat together by the fire, the wind howling outside and the house creaking under the weight of snow, and Amelia realized with a start that she was happy. Despite everything, despite the strange circumstances of their marriage and the complications ahead, she was content in this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked quietly, watching her face in the firelight. "Just that I am grateful to be here, warm and safe instead of out in that storm, and grateful to you for making it possible. You have earned your place here, Amelia. You do not need to be grateful." "Nevertheless, I am. You saved my life, Thomas, mine and my baby's. That is not something I will ever forget." He was quiet for a moment, then set down his coffee cup and reached for her hand. His fingers were warm now, fully recovered from the cold, and they wrapped around hers with gentle strength. "You are my wife. Caring for you is not charity or kindness, it is my responsibility. And more than that, it is my privilege." Amelia looked at their joined hands, at the wedding band that gleamed on her finger, and felt something shift inside her. This man had married her knowing she carried another man's child. He had given her his name, his home, his protection, asking nothing in return except that she be his partner in building a life. That was not a small thing. That was extraordinary. "Thomas, I want you to know that I am trying to be a good wife to make this work. I know it is not a traditional marriage, but I want it to be a real one, a partnership, like you said." "It already is real, Amelia. Every day we work together, every meal we share, every conversation we have, it is building something real between us. You do not have to try so hard. Just be yourself. That is enough. Is it truly, truly?" He squeezed her hand once, then released it and stood. "You should rest. It has been a long day and the baby needs you to take care of yourself." She wanted to ask him to stay, to sit with her longer, to talk about things that mattered instead of safe, trivial subjects. But she did not know how to bridge the careful distance they had maintained, so she simply nodded and wished him good night. In her room, lying in the big bed alone, Amelia realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with her husband. It had been creeping up on her for weeks, maybe longer, but she had not recognized it for what it was until now. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She had not expected to love again, had not thought her heart capable of it so soon after losing James. But love did not wait for convenient timing, and it did not ask permission before taking root. The question was what to do about it. They had agreed to a practical marriage, no romantic expectations. If she told Thomas how she was feeling, would he welcome it or would it make him uncomfortable? Would he think she was trying to manipulate him into something more than he wanted? And what about the baby? How would Thomas feel about raising another man's child as his own? They had not discussed it directly, carefully skirting around the subject as though ignoring it would make the complications disappear. She fell asleep with no answers, only questions that seemed to multiply the more she thought about them. Christmas came and went quietly, marked by a special meal and small gifts exchanged. Thomas gave her a beautiful shawl of soft wool that he said he had ordered from a catalog weeks ago. She gave him a new leather-bound journal, having noticed his old one was nearly full of notes about the ranch operations. They were practical gifts, thoughtful but not overly personal, and Amelia wondered if he felt the same sense of something missing that she did. The new year of 1883 arrived with clear, cold skies and deep snow still blanketing the ground. Amelia was nearly 7 months pregnant now, her belly a pronounced curve that made certain tasks difficult. Thomas had insisted she stop doing any heavy lifting, and between him and Mary, they had taken over most of the work that involved bending or reaching or carrying. It was frustrating to be limited, but Amelia had to admit she tired more easily now. The baby was active, kicking and rolling at all hours, and sometimes she would place Thomas's hand on her belly so he could feel the movements. She had been nervous the first time she did it, unsure how he would react, but his face had filled with such wonder that she had felt tears prick her eyes. "That is amazing," he had said softly, his palm warm against her abdomen. "To think there is a whole little person in there getting ready to meet the world. Are you nervous? About the baby coming, I mean, about having an infant in the house." "Nervous, yes, but excited too. I never thought I would be a father. I had assumed I would spend my life alone, running this ranch until I got too old and then selling it or passing it on to some distant cousin. But now everything has changed. We are going to be a family, Amelia. That is something worth celebrating." His words had warmed her more than the fire, and she had fallen asleep that night with her hand resting where his had been, feeling connected to him in a way she had not before. In late January, William came to the house in the middle of the afternoon to tell them that one of the ranch hands, young Robert, had been injured while mending a fence. He had fallen and broken his arm, and Dr. Mitchell had come from town to set it. The doctor stopped by the house before leaving to check on Amelia, who was feeling uncomfortable but not truly in pain. "Everything seems fine," he assured her after his examination. "You are getting close now, perhaps 6 or 7 weeks left. Have you felt the baby drop yet? I am not sure." "How do I know if that happens?" "You will notice your belly sitting lower, more pressure on your pelvis and bladder. It usually happens a few weeks before labor begins. When it does, I want you to send for me. I will want to examine you again before the birth." After he left, Thomas insisted Amelia sit down and put her feet up. "You are pushing yourself too hard. I can see it in your face." "I am fine, Thomas. A little tired, but fine." "You are more than a little tired. You are exhausted." "From now on, Mary is coming every day instead of 3 times a week, and I am going to ask her to take over more of the cooking." "Absolutely not. Cooking is my job, my purpose here. If I am not cooking, what use am I? Your purpose is not just to cook, Amelia. You are my wife. You are about to be a mother. Those are not small roles, and they matter far more than whether or not supper is on the table at 7 o'clock every night. I need to feel useful. Please do not take that away from me." He studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "All right." You can continue cooking if it means that much to you, but you will accept more help with everything else and you will rest when you need to. Promise me. I promise. And you will tell me if anything feels wrong, any pain, any strange symptoms, anything at all. I will. You worry too much, Thomas. Maybe. Or maybe I worry exactly the right amount for a man whose wife is about to give birth on his ranch in the middle of winter with the nearest doctor an hour away by wagon. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so tender it made her heart squeeze. I could not bear it if something happened to you. Nothing is going to happen to me. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. We are quite good at it. That does not mean it is not dangerous. My mother died giving birth to my younger sister. I was 8 years old and I remember the blood, the screaming, the way my father's face looked when they told him she was gone. So yes, I worry. Forgive me if I cannot help it. Amelia had not known about his mother, and suddenly so much about Thomas made more sense. The carefulness with which he approached relationships, the way he held himself slightly apart from people. He had learned young that love meant loss, that letting people close meant risking unbearable pain. I am sorry, Thomas. I did not know. That must have been terrible for you. It was a long time ago, but I will not pretend it does not affect how I feel now. I know the risks involved in childbirth, and I will do everything in my power to make sure you have the best possible chance of coming through it safely. I appreciate that, and I promise I will be careful, for the baby and for you. He smiled then, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less burdened. For me too, I did not expect that. Of course for you. You are my husband. I care what happens to you, what you feel. That matters to me. Something flickered in his eyes, something warm and hopeful, but before he could respond, they heard boots on the porch, and William calling out that there was a problem with one of the water troughs. Thomas squeezed her hand once, then went to deal with the crisis, leaving Amelia sitting alone with her thoughts and her racing heart. February brought warmer weather and the first signs of spring in the valley. The snow began to melt, turning the roads to mud and making travel difficult, but the cattle were healthy and the ranch was prospering. Thomas had plans to buy more breeding stock in the spring, expanding the herd and potentially increasing their profits significantly. He discussed these plans with Amelia over breakfast, valuing her opinions and taking her suggestions seriously, and she felt like a true partner in the enterprise. She was 8 months pregnant now, large and ungainly, but still managing her work with Mary's increasing help. The baby had indeed dropped lower, just as Dr. Mitchell had predicted, and the pressure on her pelvis was sometimes uncomfortable enough to make her wince. But she was healthy, the baby was active, and everything seemed to be progressing normally. It was during one of these quiet February mornings, while Thomas was out checking fence lines and Amelia was kneading bread dough, that everything came to a head. Mary was upstairs changing the linens, and Amelia was alone in the kitchen when she felt a strange sensation, a tightening across her belly that made her pause mid-motion. It passed after a moment, and she went back to her work, thinking it was simply the baby moving. But then it happened again 20 minutes later, and this time it was accompanied by a dull ache in her lower back. She straightened up slowly, her hands covered in flour, and felt a flutter of unease. It was too early. She still had 3 or 4 weeks left, possibly more. This could not be labor. Perhaps it was just practice contractions, the false labor that Dr. Mitchell had mentioned. She decided not to worry, to simply pay attention and see if the sensations continued. By noon, they had become regular, coming every 15 minutes or so and growing slightly stronger. Amelia sent Mary to find Thomas, trying to keep the fear out of her voice as she explained that she thought something might be happening. Thomas arrived within minutes, his face pale beneath his tan. "How long has this been going on?" "Since this morning." "But Thomas, it is too early. The baby is not supposed to come yet. Babies come when they are ready, not when we expect them. I am sending William for Dr. Mitchell. In the meantime, you need to lie down. I have bread rising. I need to finish the baking before Amelia." "Stop. The bread does not matter. You matter. The baby matters. Everything else can wait." He took her arm gently and guided her toward the bedroom, and she was too frightened to argue. Dr. Mitchell arrived as the sun was setting, by which time the contractions had intensified significantly and were coming every 7 or 8 minutes. He examined her while Thomas paced in the hallway outside, and when he emerged he wore a serious expression. "It is early, but not dangerously so. The baby should be developed enough to survive if all goes well. But I will not lie to you, Mr. Northfield. Early babies can have difficulties. We will do everything we can, but you need to prepare yourself for any outcome." Thomas looked like he might be sick. "And Amelia, how is she?" "Strong and healthy. She is young, she has good constitution, and the labor is progressing normally so far." I am cautiously optimistic, but these things are never certain. I will need to stay until the baby is born. It could be hours yet, possibly well into the night. It was indeed well into the night, past midnight and approaching dawn before the baby finally arrived. Amelia had labored through the long dark hours with Thomas holding her hand and Dr. Mitchell offering calm encouragement. The pain had been intense, worse than anything she had imagined, and there were moments when she was certain she could not endure another minute. But then there was a final tremendous effort, a sense of something releasing, and suddenly a baby's cry filled the room, thin and reedy but unmistakably alive. "It is a girl," Dr. Mitchell announced, placing the tiny wrinkled infant on Amelia's chest. "Small but breathing well." "Congratulations, Mrs. Northfield." Amelia looked down at her daughter through tears of exhaustion and relief and overwhelming love. She was perfect, tiny and red-faced with a cap of dark hair and eyes that squinted against the lamplight. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that clearly worked just fine based on the volume of her cries. "Hello, little one," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking. "Hello, my darling girl. I am your mama, and I am so happy to meet you." Thomas was standing beside the bed, his eyes wide and his expression filled with such naked emotion that Amelia felt her heart overflow. "Can I?" he asked hesitantly, reaching out one hand toward the baby. "Of course. Meet your daughter." He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, and she immediately grasped it with surprising strength. Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both, and when he looked at Amelia his eyes were wet with tears. "She is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for this gift." Dr. Mitchell finished his work efficiently, making sure both mother and baby were stable, then gave them instructions for care. "The baby needs to eat frequently, every 2 or 3 hours. Mrs. Northfield needs rest, good food, and help with everything while she recovers. No heavy work for at least 6 weeks, preferably longer. And if there are any concerning symptoms with either of them, send for me immediately." After he left, collected by William, who had stayed up all night waiting for news, Thomas brought Amelia water and helped her settle more comfortably in the bed with the baby tucked securely in her arms. "What will you name her?" he asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the mattress. Amelia had thought about this during the long months of her pregnancy. She had considered naming the baby after James, but that had felt wrong somehow, like trying to replace him rather than honor him. "I was thinking Sarah. Sarah Rose. Rose was my mother's name. Sarah Rose Northfield. It is a beautiful name. Thomas, we need to talk about this, about her, about what this means. What it means is that we have a daughter. That is all that matters right now. But she is not yours. She is James's child. I need to know how you feel about that, if you will be able to love her the same as if she were your own." Thomas looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in Amelia's arms, her tiny face relaxed and her breathing steady. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I have been thinking about this since you told me you were pregnant, about what it would mean to raise another man's child, and I realized something important. Love is not about blood, Amelia. It is about choice. It is about showing up every day and choosing to care for someone, to put their needs above your own, to be there through the hard times and the good times. This little girl needs a father, and I am choosing to be that for her. She is mine now, in every way that matters, and I will love her as such." Amelia could not speak past the lump in her throat. She had hoped Thomas would accept the baby, but she had not dared to dream he would embrace her so completely. "You are an extraordinary man, Thomas Northfield. I am just a man who understands what it means to find family in unexpected places. You and Sarah, you are my family now. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how much that means to me." He leaned down and kissed Amelia's forehead gently, then did the same to the baby. It was a moment of pure sweetness, and Amelia knew she would remember it for the rest of her life. The weeks following Sarah's birth were both exhausting and beautiful. The baby ate constantly, her tiny stomach requiring frequent refills, and Amelia spent most of her time either feeding her or trying to sleep in between. Thomas was endlessly helpful, bringing her meals in bed, taking Sarah so Amelia could rest, even learning to change diapers with an awkward competence that made Amelia smile. The ranch hands were delighted with the baby, stopping by regularly to peer at her and offer congratulations. Young Robert especially seemed fascinated, his broken arm now healing well, and he would sit for ages just watching Sarah sleep in her cradle that Thomas had built in the corner of the bedroom. Mary came every day now, taking over all the cooking and cleaning so Amelia could focus on recovering and caring for the baby. It was strange to have so much help, to not be constantly working, but Amelia found she did not mind as much as she had expected. Being a mother was work enough, especially with a baby who seemed to have opinions about everything and was not shy about expressing them. It was late March, when Sarah was about a month old, that everything changed between Amelia and Thomas. The baby had finally settled into something resembling a sleep schedule, and Amelia was beginning to feel more like herself. She had moved back to sleeping in the main bedroom after spending the first weeks after the birth in the smaller room, closer to the kitchen, where she could more easily tend to Sarah at night. Thomas had insisted on keeping his room down the hall, maintaining the careful separation they had established. But Amelia was tired of the separation. She was tired of tiptoeing around her feelings and pretending their marriage was purely practical when her heart knew differently. She loved Thomas, deeply and completely, and she wanted him to know it. She waited until after supper one evening after Sarah had been fed and put to bed and the house was quiet. Thomas was in his usual spot by the fire with a book, and Amelia sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Thomas, we need to talk." He set down his book immediately, his full attention on her. "Is everything all right? Is it Sarah? Are you feeling well?" "Everything is fine, but there is something I need to say, and I am not sure how you will receive it." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When we married, we agreed it would be a practical arrangement, a partnership based on mutual benefit rather than romantic feeling. And I thought that would be enough, that I could be content with that kind of marriage. But you are not content," he said quietly, and she could not read his expression. "I am more than content. I am happy, Thomas, happier than I ever expected to be again after James died. And that is because of you. Because of the way you have treated me, the way you have cared for Sarah, the way you have made us feel safe and cherished. I have fallen in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." There was a long moment of silence. Thomas stared at her, his sage-colored eyes wide with what might have been shock or hope or fear. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "You love me." "Yes. I know it was not part of our agreement, and if you do not feel the same way, I understand, but I needed you to know. I am tired of pretending I do not care when every day I care more. Amelia." He reached for her hands, holding them between his own. "I have been in love with you since before we were married. Since those quiet morning breakfasts when you would tell me about your childhood, and I would think about how much I wanted to hear those stories every day for the rest of my life. When I proposed this marriage, it was not entirely practical on my side. I hoped that you might come to care for me eventually, that perhaps we could build something real, but I never dared to hope you might actually love me. You love me, truly, truly, completely, desperately. You and Sarah both. You are everything I never knew I needed. And I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement for a cook, even if you were hiding very important information." Amelia laughed through her tears, and then Thomas was kissing her. Not the chaste kiss from their wedding, but a real kiss full of passion and promise and deep feeling. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into the connection between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "We have wasted so much time being careful with each other. Then let us not waste any more. I love you, Thomas Northfield, and I want this to be a real marriage in every sense of the word. Will you move back into our bedroom? Will you be my husband not just in name but in truth? There is nothing I want more." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Amelia felt like she was glowing from the inside out. That night, for the first time since their marriage, they fell asleep in the same bed, Sarah's cradle beside them and Thomas's arm wrapped protectively around Amelia. It felt like coming home in a way that went beyond mere physical shelter. This was where she belonged, where they all belonged, together as a family. The spring months passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch flourished under Thomas's careful management, the cattle thriving and the profits increasing enough that he was able to hire additional help and finally take some of the burden off William and the other hands. Sarah grew rapidly, becoming more alert and interactive, her face lighting up whenever Thomas came into view. He was completely besotted with his daughter, spending every available moment with her, talking to her about the ranch and the animals and everything he wanted to teach her as she grew. Amelia had never been happier. Her marriage was everything she had once dreamed of, built on love and trust and partnership. Thomas was an attentive husband, affectionate and considerate, always putting her and Sarah first. They would sit together in the evenings after Sarah was asleep, talking about their days and their dreams for the future, and Amelia would marvel at how much her life had changed in the span of a year. "I cannot believe that this time last year I was desperate and alone, thinking I had no future," she said one evening in late May as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "And I was alone here, thinking I would spend my life without love or family. It is amazing what can change when two people find each other at exactly the right moment. Or the wrong moment that turns out to be right," Amelia said with a smile. "I came here under false pretenses, pregnant and terrified, and you could have sent me away. Instead, you gave me a home." "You were already home," Thomas said, echoing the words he had spoken so many months ago when he discovered her secret. "You just did not know it yet. This ranch, this life, it was waiting for you, for both of you." I love you so much it sometimes frightens me. I lost James so suddenly, with no warning. Every day I am grateful for you, but I also worry about losing you." Thomas pulled her close, tucking her against his side. "I cannot promise I will live forever, Amelia. None of us can. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to be here for you and Sarah for as long as possible. And that every day we have together is a gift I will never take for granted." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Then, Sarah's cry came from inside the house, and they both rose to tend to her, moving together with the practiced ease of partners who knew each other's rhythms perfectly. That summer was one of the best of Amelia's life. Sarah continued to thrive, hitting all her milestones with robust enthusiasm. She was crawling by 6 months, pulling herself up on furniture by 8, and clearly planning to walk any day. Thomas was endlessly patient with her, following her around to make sure she did not hurt herself while still allowing her the freedom to explore. The ranch prospered too, and in August, Thomas made the decision to build an addition onto the house. "We need more space," he explained to Amelia as they looked at the plans he had sketched. "Another bedroom at least, maybe 2, and I want to expand the kitchen so you have more room to work when you start cooking again." "I have been cooking," Amelia protested. "I mean really cooking, not just simple meals. I know you miss it, and once Sarah is a bit older and needs less constant attention, I want you to be able to pursue whatever makes you happy. If that is elaborate meals, wonderful. If it is something else entirely, that is wonderful too. This is your home, Amelia. It should reflect what you need and want. What I want is to keep building this life with you. The rest is just details." He kissed her then, long and sweet, and she thought about how lucky she was to have found this man who loved her so completely. The addition was completed by October, and the extra space transformed the house into something truly special. They now had a proper guest room, a larger kitchen with a new stove that made Amelia's cooking even easier, and a nursery for Sarah decorated with curtains Amelia had sewn herself. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Amelia realized she was pregnant again. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not been certain until Dr. Mitchell confirmed it during a visit to town. This time there was no fear or desperation, only joy and excitement. She told Thomas that evening after Sarah was asleep, watching his face transform with happiness. "A baby. We are having a baby." He said it with wonder, as though it were a miracle, which perhaps it was. "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though she could see the answer written plainly on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I love Sarah with all my heart, and I always will. But to have a child of our own, born of our love for each other, that is something I never dared to dream about. When is the baby due?" "Sometime in late May or early June," Dr. Mitchell thinks. "So we have plenty of time to prepare. This calls for a celebration. We should do something special." They celebrated quietly that evening with a nice meal and talking about names and all the ways their family was about to grow. Sarah, now 9 months old and babbling constantly, seemed to sense the excitement in the air and was more animated than usual, making them both laugh with her antics. The winter of 1883 into 1884 was mild compared to the previous year, with less snow and warmer temperatures. Amelia's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she felt stronger this time, more confident in her body and what it was capable of. She continued her normal routines well into her 7th month, when Thomas finally put his foot down and insisted she accept more help. "I do not want a repeat of last time, with you going into labor early because you pushed yourself too hard," he said firmly. "Mary is taking over all the cooking and heavy work starting now. You can supervise if you want to feel useful, but you are done with the physical labor. You are being overprotective. Perhaps. But I would rather be overprotective and have you and the baby both healthy than take unnecessary risks. Humor me, please. She did, because she loved him and because she understood his fears even if she did not entirely share them. This pregnancy felt different, easier somehow, and she was not worried about complications. But if it made Thomas feel better to be extra cautious, she could live with that. Sarah celebrated her first birthday in early February with a small party attended by the ranch hands and Mary and a few neighbors from the surrounding properties. She was walking now, toddling around with determined enthusiasm and getting into everything. Thomas had built a small fence around her play area to keep her contained, but she had already figured out how to climb over it, much to everyone's amusement and concern. "She is going to be a handful," William observed, watching Sarah make another escape attempt. "Just like her mother," Thomas said with a grin, earning him a playful swat from Amelia. "I was never a handful. I was a perfectly well-behaved child. Somehow I doubt that very much." As spring arrived and Amelia entered her final weeks of pregnancy, the ranch prepared for the spring roundup. Thomas hired extra hands to help with the work since he was determined to stay close to home in case Amelia went into labor. She appreciated his concern even as she teased him about it. Women have babies all the time without their husbands hovering anxiously. "You do not need to rearrange the entire ranch schedule for me." "Yes, I do. You and this baby are the most important things in my life, along with Sarah. The ranch will survive if I am not out there every single day, but I will not survive if something happens to you." The baby arrived on a warm afternoon in late May, 3 weeks before Sarah's birthday had been. This labor was shorter and less intense than the first, and by evening Amelia was holding a healthy, squalling baby boy with Thomas's dark hair and what would probably turn out to be his father's sage-colored eyes. "A son," Thomas said, his voice choked with emotion as he held the baby for the first time. "We have a son." "What should we name him?" Amelia asked, watching her husband cradle their child with such tenderness it made her heart ache in the best way. "I was thinking James. After your first husband. He should be remembered and honored if you are comfortable with that." Amelia felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You would do that. Name our son after the man I loved before you. He was important to you and he was Sarah's father. That makes him important to me too. And I think it is right that there be a James in this family, carrying on his name and his memory. James Thomas, then, after both the good men in my life." They named their son James Thomas Northfield, and he was welcomed into the family with overwhelming love. Sarah was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to touch him constantly and trying to help with everything. She would bring him her toys and pat his head gently, saying "baby, baby" in her sweet toddler voice. The summer passed in a happy blur of sleepless nights and busy days. James was an easier baby than Sarah had been, content to sleep for longer stretches and less inclined to fuss. By the time he was 3 months old, Amelia was feeling fully recovered and back to her normal routines, balancing motherhood with her work in the kitchen and her role as Thomas's partner in running the ranch. Life settled into a new normal, one that was chaotic and exhausting but also deeply fulfilling. The ranch continued to prosper, allowing Thomas to finally hire a proper foreman to oversee the day-to-day operations so he could spend more time with his family. William was promoted to the position, and he took to it naturally, managing the men and the cattle with quiet competence. Amelia had never been happier. She had a husband who adored her, 2 beautiful children, a comfortable home, and a secure future. Sometimes she would think back to that desperate woman who had answered an advertisement for a cook, pregnant and terrified and alone, and marvel at how far she had come. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching Sarah chase fireflies while James slept in his cradle beside them. "Just about how grateful I am. For you, for this life, for everything we have built together. I never imagined I could be this happy. Neither did I. But I think that is the beauty of love, Amelia. It gives us more than we ever thought to ask for, more than we ever imagined possible. I love you, Thomas, more than words can say. And I love you. You and Sarah and James, you are my whole world." As the years passed, their family continued to grow. 2 more children joined them, a daughter named Emma in 1886 and another son named William in 1888. The house that had once seemed too large for one lonely rancher was now filled with noise and laughter and the constant activity of 4 children. The ranch prospered under Thomas's management, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. They were able to send their children to good schools, to build a real community with their neighbors, and to contribute to the growing town of Independence. Amelia found fulfillment not just in her family, but in becoming a leader in the community, helping to organize a church group and teaching other women the cooking skills she had honed over years of practice. Sarah grew into a strong, capable young woman who loved the ranch as much as her father did. She learned to ride almost before she could walk properly, and by the time she was 10, she was helping with the cattle alongside the ranch hands. James was quieter, more studious, with a love of books that reminded Amelia of Thomas. Emma was wild and fearless, always getting into trouble and dragging young William along with her. Through it all, Amelia and Thomas's love only deepened. They weathered the normal challenges of married life and parenthood, disagreements and hard times, but their foundation was solid. They had built their marriage on honesty and partnership, and those principles served them well through the years. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Amelia with a trip to San Francisco, their first real time away from the ranch, and the children since Sarah had been born. They left the children in Mary's capable care, now a permanent member of the household, and spent 3 glorious days exploring the city, dining in fine restaurants, and simply being together without the demands of daily life. "Thank you for this," Amelia said as they stood on a bluff overlooking the ocean, the salt air tangling her hair and the sun warm on her face. "It is wonderful to have time, just the 2 of us, even though I miss the children terribly already. We have earned a little time to ourselves. And I wanted to celebrate properly. 10 years, Amelia. 10 years of marriage, 4 beautiful children, and a life beyond anything I imagined when I placed that advertisement for a cook. The best decision you ever made," she said with a smile. "The second best. The best decision was asking you to stay when I found out you were pregnant. The best decision was looking at you and realizing that you were already home. I was I not? Even though I did not know it yet. This stubborn, kind, wonderful man opened his home and his heart, and he gave me everything I needed to heal and to live again." Thomas pulled her close, kissing her with the passion and tenderness that had never faded over the years. "And you gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You made my house a home and my life worth living. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over, Amelia. You were worth every moment of uncertainty, every complication. You were worth it all." They stood together looking out at the endless ocean. 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, even if it had seemed like the wrong one. A pregnant widow and a lonely rancher, brought together by an advertisement and desperation, building a love that would last the rest of their lives. When they returned to the ranch, they found chaos in the best possible way. The children were all talking at once, trying to tell them about everything that had happened during their brief absence. Sarah had helped deliver a calf. James had finished 3 books. Emma and William had gotten into a mud fight that had required extensive cleanup. Amelia looked around at her loud, messy, perfect family and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. This was home. Not the house or the ranch or even the beautiful California valley, but these people. This love. This life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination, and the courage to trust in second chances. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Amelia and Thomas sat together on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the sound of cattle lowing in the distance was a familiar comfort. "No regrets?" Thomas asked, taking her hand in his. "Not a single one. This life, this family, it is everything I ever wanted and so much more than I dared to hope for. What about you?" "My only regret is that we did not have more time, that our years together will eventually end, as all things must. But I will treasure every single day we have, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are." "I already know. I have known since the day you told me to stay that I was already home. That was the day I started to believe in happy endings again. And we got one, did we not? Our happy ending." "No," Amelia corrected gently, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Not an ending, a beginning. This is just the beginning of forever, Thomas. Our story is not ending. It is still being written, one beautiful day at a time." He kissed the top of her head, and they sat in peaceful silence, watching the stars wheel overhead and listening to the sounds of their home settling in for the night. Inside, their children slept safe and secure. Around them, the ranch they had built together stood strong, and between them, the love they had found in the most unexpected of circumstances burned bright and eternal. Amelia Northfield had answered an advertisement for a cook, desperate and afraid, carrying another man's child and hoping only for survival. Instead, she had found a home, a partner, a family, and a love that would sustain her through all the years to come. She had found Thomas, who had looked at her with clear eyes and an open heart and said the words that changed everything. "Stay. You're already home." And she had stayed and built a life more beautiful than any she could have imagined. A life filled with children's laughter and hard work and quiet moments of profound connection. A life of purpose and partnership and enduring love. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be a place where new beginnings bloomed like wildflowers after a desert rain. Where 2 lonely people could find each other against all odds and build something lasting. Where a pregnant widow and a cowboy could create a family that would thrive for generations, anchored by the love that had grown from the most unpromising of seeds into something magnificent. As the moon rose over the Sierra Nevada mountains and silvered the valley below, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Home was not a place. It was this man beside her, these children sleeping peacefully inside, this life they had built together from nothing but faith and love and the courage to trust in tomorrow. She was home. She had always been home, from the moment she walked up that dusty drive with one hand on her belly and hope warring with fear in her heart. Thomas had seen that truth before she did, and he had spoken it into being with 5 simple words: "Stay. You're already home." And she had stayed, and she had found everything she never knew she needed. She had found her place in the world, her purpose, her family. She had found Thomas, and in finding him, she had found herself. The years would bring more changes, more challenges, more joys and sorrows, as all lives do. Their children would grow and have families of their own. The ranch would pass to the next generation, and then the next. But the foundation they built, the love they shared, would endure through it all, because love, real love, does not end. It transforms and evolves, deepening with time and strengthening with shared experience. The love between Amelia and Thomas would ripple outward through their children and grandchildren, shaping the future in ways they could not predict, but would always be proud of. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and the house was peaceful, they would sit together and remember. Remember the beginning when everything was uncertain and the future was unclear. Remember the moment when fear transformed into hope, when survival became truly living, when two strangers became partners, and then lovers, and finally, completely, irrevocably home to each other. They would remember, and they would be grateful. Grateful for the chance meeting, for the desperate gamble, for the kindness that changed everything. Grateful for the children who filled their days with chaos and joy. Grateful for the ranch that gave them purpose and security. Grateful for each other, always and forever, for as long as their days lasted and beyond. This was their story. The pregnant widow and the cowboy, the desperate gamble that became a beautiful reality, the practical arrangement that transformed into enduring love. The ending that was really a beginning, opening onto years of happiness and partnership and family. And if anyone asked Amelia Northfield how she had built such a beautiful life, she would smile and tell them the truth. She had answered an advertisement. She had taken a chance. She had walked up a dusty California drive in the autumn of 1882, pregnant and widowed and terrified, seeking only a job and finding instead everything she never knew she needed. She had found Thomas, who looked at her and saw not her desperation but her strength, who chose compassion over anger, love over practicality, forever over convenience, who gave her the greatest gift anyone had ever given her, a home not just in his house but in his heart, and she had stayed. Through the hard times and the good times, through 4 children and countless challenges, through a decade and more of building a life together one day at a time. She had stayed because he was right, had been right from the beginning. She was already home.